It's a great opportunity for us to have you talk to us today, Trish, about your journey as a woman and as a leader, and I would say as an inspirational leader. You will inspire many nurses. You currently do, and I think by doing this, you'll reach many more who will benefit from hearing your story. So I've just got a few questions to ask you, and the first one is, can you tell our members what or who inspired you to become a nurse?
Sure, yeah. So I talk to a lot of nurses who say, I knew from a very early age I wanted to be a nurse, and that's not quite the case for me. But my mum was a healthcare assistant for the majority of the time that I was growing up. She worked in a local nursing home. And I used to start going up to meet her when I was about 14 years of age. I used to go and sit on the steps outside. I can remember that. And then one day it was raining and the matron came out and said, why don't you come and sit inside? And when I was sitting inside waiting for my mum, there was all these elderly people walking about with Zimmers and started talking to me. And because I was very close to my nan and granddad, I just had this love of elderly people. I found them fascinating. The stories fascinating. So when I came to leaving school, I wasn't clever enough. Well, I didn't think I was clever enough to go to university. So I was looking for a career. And so I sort of, because I'd had that experience with elderly people and doing a bit of volunteering in my mum's nursing home, and because I was so close to my nan and granddad, I opted for a career in nursing. And that was 33 years ago. And I can honestly say I've never looked back.
Amazing. 33 years. You must have started when you were 5.
Obviously.
Yeah, no, really, thank you for that, for Trish. And the second question is, can you tell us what your first role was and what were your favourite, most memorable elements of that role?
Yeah, so when I qualified, this is hard to believe, but there were very few nursing jobs. So when I did my nurse training, I'd always thought that I would go into sort of critical care and general surgery. That's what I loved the most in my training. But when jobs came along, there was 27 of us in our class and there were 6 permanent jobs. Can you believe that? And it was at a time where you were actually interviewed by the director of nursing from the School of Nursing you were in. So we were given a little bit of prep from our School of Nursing tutors and basically told, whatever they offer you, you must say yes. So when I went for my interview, I'll never forget this. The director of nursing said to me, how would you feel about a job in gynecology? Well, in those days, you didn't do gynecology as a placement, but I did what any good student nurse would do. And I said, I would really relish the opportunity for a job in gynecology, thinking, please don't put me in gynecology. Anyway, I got a job in gynecology. And because gynecology at the time, it wasn't a training ward, they hadn't had a newly qualified nurse for well over 10 years. So I was a newly qualified nurse on a ward and a speciality that I knew nothing about. So, but you know what? I had the most fantastic experience there. And some of the things that I remember were feeling quite inept as a 20-year-old young woman who didn't have a lot of life experience of my own. You know, I wasn't married, I didn't have any children. And going into a gynecology ward and experiencing some quite traumatic things, actually, particularly around loss, women, you know, losing babies, and that feeling that what did I have to offer those women? And the most profound thing happened to me probably in my first year of training. So it was a really, really busy shift, a late shift. And I was rushing around trying to get all my jobs done. And I was called to come and bring a lady back from theatre who unfortunately had lost a baby. And I brought her back on the trolley. And it was in the old fashioned days where we had to lift people across. You remember? No,
yeah, I do. Yes.
And as I moved this lady across, I was already thinking about the next thing I had to do because somebody was due a set of observations. And as I turned around and I went to open the curtains, I heard this woman start to cry. And I was ashamed to say this, but I will say this. At the time, for 20 seconds, for a split second, I was thinking about should I pretend I didn't hear it because I was on to my next task. But I didn't, thank goodness. And I closed the curtain back and I sat down with her. And I can't remember the conversation I had with that woman. But all I knew was I had nothing to say, but I just sat and listened to her. And about 3 weeks later, a card came through the postal ward from that lady. I've still got it now, and it can still make me cry. And she just talked about how important it was that I sat and listened to her. And that's when I kind of got what it was all about, the elements of never too busy to make time, because the impact you have on that person lasts for a lifetime with them. So my gynae experience was just it was just an experience I'll never forget. And another really important point about it was the healthcare assistants that taught me an awful lot, because it wasn't a training ward. It was so busy. Those healthcare assistants, anything that needed doing, come with me, I'll show you. And I'll never ever, and that's something that I've always been very grateful of. And in my senior nursing years, I've always wanted to give back to healthcare assistants that have wanted to go on and learn themselves. So two great things that I took from that experience on a gynecology ward. So my advice would be, as a nurse, whatever you think you want to start out as, don't worry if it doesn't start out at the beginning, because you've got years to come. And eventually I did end up in a speciality that I wanted to be on, but going into different things, because it's not about the speciality, it's about the people you work with, because that's who are going to make you be who you are eventually.
Thank you, Trish. That's really powerful. And it's also about taking from every experience something to help you grow and develop as that person and professional, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Really, thank you for sharing that. And thinking about career breaks and, you know, sort of your big break in your career, can you tell us what your first big break was?
Yeah, so again, I had no career aspirations. So I went into nursing because I liked people. I wanted to look after them. But when I qualified, I thought if I was lucky, I'd probably get to be a ward sister, because everybody wanted the navy blue uniform. I don't care, you know, that's still, you know, is an important thing to a lot of people. So I didn't think any further than that. I've talked about my experience on the gynecology ward, and I quite quickly moved on to, it was the old grades in those days, but I quite quickly, just after 12 months, got a senior staff nurse post. And I was a ward manager within 5 years. And the one thing I would say is, it was other people that saw the potential in me, not the other way around. So and it was just those conversations that people would have with me, just quietly to say, you know, you're really good. Have you ever thought about this? Have you ever thought about, there's a job going to come up, I think, in the next 6 months. I think you should think about it. So it wasn't one big break, but continuously throughout my career, it's been people just encouraging me really to think about the next move.
And that is so important, isn't it? That we look around and think about how we could provide that continuous support and encouragement to people around us so they can progress as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know this from my own experience now, you know, in a senior position, I look at people and I can see their potential. I can see where they're going to be in 5 and 10 years time when they can't. And actually, that's my job now. That's my responsibility. That's, you know, my job is to set direction, but to create the environment for people to grow and be the best they can possibly be. So that's very important for people in leadership roles.
Yeah, and that's really well put and very important. Thank you. Were you always determined to progress in your career? And where do you think that came from?
Yeah, so again, over my professional life, I've sort of, you know, undergone mentoring and coaching, and, you know, you explore that kind of thing about your drive and where your drive comes from. I always tell people I'm not an ambitious person, and they laugh and say, well, you must be, because you're chief executive, you must be ambitious. And I don't describe myself as ambitious, but I have got a drive in me. But the drive is the same drive as it was in 1989. And that was get in my car every day and go and be the best I can possibly be and give as much as I possibly can. So the ambition is always just being about whatever job I'm doing, be the best version of myself I can be in that job. And again, I think that comes a bit back to your student nurse days. So when you have your role models, you never quite met the perfect nurse, but you take a bit of one and a bit of the other and a bit, try and create who you wanted to be. So, you know, I used to be envious of people who had a career path who'd say in 5 years I want to be this, and so now I'm a mentor to others. And certainly when I was in the director of nursing post, I used to get a lot of people who would come to me for career development and advice. And they say things like, right, I need some help because my ambition is to be a director of nursing in the next 5 years. And I always used to say to people was, well, you can be if you want to be, but you need to choose. Do you want to be a director of nursing, or do you want to be the best director of nursing possible? And that's what you've got to think about. So don't think less about how long you want it to be till you get there. Think more about what you want to be when you do get there, because these jobs are all about experiential learning. And just like in student nurse, you know, it's not that you don't know how to do it if you've never had the experience. So as you want to progress, my advice would always be, do it when you think you've got enough experience.
Yeah, perfect. And is that something we say that's an internal drive? Is it come from anything or anybody externally, or is it just something innate within you, that drive?
I think I've come to accept that it's something within me, but what the drive in my professional life is when I'm inspired by others. When I see people in action and I think, oh, I'd love to do that, or I see them doing a role and doing it well and think, oh, that must be great. So my inspiration probably comes from other people, and that's what's always sort of driven me to move on and to push myself a little bit further. And then obviously over the years having people in my ear saying, you know what, if you wanted to do that, try it, you could do it.
Yeah, excellent. And listening to them. Another question for me is, what do you feel has been the most challenging part of progressing your career, and what barriers you may have faced and how you overcame them?
I guess the biggest challenging barrier was possibly myself and my self-belief at times. You know, people talk a lot about imposter syndrome. It's not something that you learn to just, it comes and goes in your life and in your career. So being mindful of that is important. And being really honest, there's been times in my career where I've not been in the right environment with the right people. And that can be difficult. Because, you know, I've talked to you earlier about it's about the people around you that set the conditions for you. And so my advice is always to people in the career, if you feel that you're not being your best possible version of yourself, then think about, is it you or is it the environment that you're in? And I think that's very important, because that environment and managing your own self-doubt are probably the two big things to just be self-aware about as you move through your career.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm just conscious of time, so I'm just sort of looking at the questions, and I'm wondering if you could sort of tell us, you know, as a nurse first and foremost, what do you find most difficult about being a chief exec in an NHS trust?
What do I find most difficult? Actually, being a nurse and being a chief executive, I think is a great advantage, really, because I'm able to draw on my clinical experience. So when I'm sitting around the boardroom and we're making decisions, I'm always thinking about the patient. I'm always thinking about the impact that it's going to have on the patient or the staff. So there's a lot of benefits really to being a nurse and being a chief executive, for sure. I don't actually think there are any barriers. I think there's a lot of people in a nursing profession that would never see themselves as a chief executive. And perhaps that's because they think that there's a certain element where they have to move away from patient care. But I think that's like any hierarchy. If you stayed in nursing and you went up to, I can remember thinking about taking a matron's post and people saying, oh, well, it means you've got to move away from the bedside, but that's your choice. So even now as a chief executive, I choose, and as you can imagine, in a COVID world, I'm a bit restricted, but I choose to be visible. I choose not to shy away from going on wards and departments because it's what I do naturally. So I actually think you can do a bit of both, I think, and actually being out there visible, I think is really important, and it's a really good leadership quality to have, actually, to make sure you're still there and still on the ground and understanding, and never forget how hard it is. Sitting around the top table, planning things. You can put a plan on the page; it's easy, but don't forget about the logistics of the people who've got to deliver it. So yeah, it's would I like to be out there more and be more clinically involved? Probably. And probably there were times, particularly in the first wave of COVID, when all I wanted to do was put that uniform on, because I still got a uniform and I'm still registered. I wanted to be out there on that front line, but actually my job was to be doing something different, which was going to enable and empower people to be on the front line. So swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And what would you say to a nurse who is just starting out on their career?
Oh gosh, advice to a younger self of mine. So I look back on my career, and I would look at someone like myself and say to a young nurse, I could probably be an example to you of, you can be whatever you want to be with the right support and the right determination. So sometimes people look at chief executives and think we must be ready-made packages, and we're not. And what I'd say is, if you look at me, I'm just a kid from a council estate that came through school with no real ambition, no real qualifications, and probably didn't think I was clever enough to do a degree. I didn't get any of my degrees till I was in my 30s, and I managed to get 3 of them after that. And I've managed to have a successful career by hard work, enjoyment of always doing things that feed my soul, and having the right people around me at the right time. And the other thing I would also say is having the balance of working hard and having a good family and home life, because as great as my success has been in my career, my family and my kids are probably my greatest success. So getting that balance is very important. But honestly, the NHS can take you in all different kinds of avenues, and if you want it and you've got good people around you, then please go for it.
Thank you for that. And final question for me, and it is International Women's Day. So would you recommend nursing as a career choice for women?
Absolutely, because that's exactly what it is. It's a choice. There's so many avenues that you can take. So if I look at nursing, you can think about the pathways you can take. You can stay clinical, you can go into advanced clinical practice, you can take a managerial leadership role, or you could take an educational role. And as your life develops and as your circumstances change, nursing allows you that opportunity to flex and change with it and be adaptable. So it would absolutely, and I'm extremely proud that my youngest child is just finishing an access to nursing course and will be starting a degree in September this year. And I couldn't be prouder.
Excellent. Yeah. And is there anything else you want to say to people watching this interview? Any final things you'd like to add?
No, what I just say to people is, if it's something that you think is of interest to you, then go and try it. And there will be a lot of mistakes that you make in your career, because we all do. And it's not the mistakes that you make, it's how you react, and it's your response that will define you. And when I speak to a lot of nurses on that first day, when they come into the first clinical placement, they tell me they're worried about making a mistake, causing harm, not knowing what to do. Well, they're always the best kind of nurses, because if you come into it with commitment and self-awareness, you'll go a long way.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Trish. That's been really, really powerful, really really informative and inspirational. So thank you very much for giving us your time, and I hope you have a positive and inspirational International Women's Day in your own organisation, which I am sure you will. So
yes,
thank you very much.
We're looking to celebrate it well. So, and to everybody out there, happy International Women's Day.